What's up, guys? Long time no see. I might have forgot this channel exists. I might have been in prison. I'm not gonna tell you about it. You can just guess. So, in my extended hiatus, we'll say, I've gotten a little bit better at chess. So, what else should I do with it other than share it with the good folks and the assholes of the internet? That's you. So, we're gonna go ahead and jump into some different openings. So, if you're new to chess or you aren't familiar with some different openings, this might help you out a little bit. And based on your playstyle, maybe you'll decide what maybe you should look into a little bit. So we'll go ahead and we're going to look at the most popular opening, e4. And this is the King's Pawn opening. Now, e4 openings, as a general rule, are going to be a little bit more aggressive. They might be a little more open, but generally, e4 openings, you're going to be a little more likely to checkmate your opponent in the middle game. Now, nothing we look at today is going to be definitive. I can't talk definitive. You can get open, closed, boring, exciting, sharp, not sharp, positions from pretty much anything, but I'm just doing a very general overview of positions, and we'll look at like one or two in each opening, and if you enjoy this, maybe I'll go into a couple more. So, an example of an e4 opening, probably one of the most popular ones, is the Italian game, which is this. And in the Italian game, it's a little bit more of an aggressive opening because you get early pressure on this f7 square, and black gets early pressure on this f2 square, and you're just a little bit more likely to checkmate your opponent in the middle game. So that's one of the e4 openings that you can look at. Another one is oh yeah, I gotta move for black too, don't I? Is the Ruy Lopez, and if I play e4, this is what I play. Now, I don't play e4 too often. I don't really recommend playing e4, and I'll explain why in a minute. But generally, Ruy Lopez games, black will respond with a6. You can exchange it. I don't recommend exchanging it. Now, black's gonna end up having to double up one of the pawns, probably the d6 pawn, so they don't create a pawn island. But then they get their compensation is they get two bishops and you lose your bishop. And I like bishops. Bishops can pin pieces. They can move across the board quickly. I think I agree with most of the grandmasters of the world who say that bishops are worth a little bit more than knights. So I'll keep my bishop on the board. Play will often follow with something like knight to f6, castles, bishop e7, and rook to e1. Now, this is considered a closed Ruy Lopez, but it's still a little bit more aggressive. Again, you have pressure on this f7 square. Your rook's on e1, ready to go. It's in the middle of the board where you generally want your rooks. If anything ever happens, say d5 or something. Whoops. I mean, obviously, it probably won't happen now. It'd be nice if it happened now. It'd be pretty good for white, but if anything happens, you get this e file opened up, and generally you're a little bit more likely to just checkmate your opponent in the middle game. So because that's a little bit more aggressive. So I said I don't play e4 often, and I don't recommend playing it. Why did I say that? So I like to play c5 in these positions. This is my favorite opening for black out of anything. This is called the Sicilian Defense. Now, generally, out of the open, white wants good winning chances against black. They don't want anything near equal. On the master level and above, white has won 38% of the games in this position, and black has won 32% of the games, and they've tied 30%. So that's a 6% variance on move 2 in the winning percentage. That's very good for black. So this opening, the Sicilian Defense, plays very, very well. There's many different variations you can learn. There's the Accelerated Dragon, which you'll play g6 at some point, and then bishop to g7, and it's a little bit more positional than the stuff I'm going to show you, but there's several different variations you can learn, and if you'd like me to go into detail, I will. But we're going to look at what I play the most. What I see the most is the open Sicilian, which is something like this. If they play d4 in the Sicilian, you generally want to take. You try to side pawn for center pawn. That's usually a good thing. And this is called the open Sicilian. Again, there's a couple different responses in pretty much any position. So this is called the classical variation, and play generally goes as follows. Not there. It's okay, but more common is queen to d2. And often in these open Sicilians, white'll castle queenside, and black's gonna castle kingside. So white's gonna end up storming these pawns on the king side of the board, and black's gonna end up pushing the pawns on the I'm sorry, white's going to move the pawns on the king side of the board, and black's going to move the pawns on the queen side of the board. Often the bishop will go to b7 or f7, the queen will slide over to c8, and it's going to be a race to see who checkmates who first. So this is a sharp and aggressive position, but it's still a little bit more controlled. There's still a little bit room for error. If you want an even sharper position, I recommend looking at the Najdorf. And that's in this position where you play a6. So a6 looks a little weird, right? Generally in the open, you don't want to move your pawns on the side of the board, right? You want to develop your knights and bishops first, and you want to move some of your center pawns to get center control. So why would you move, your side pawn? In fact, this is a very common position on the Grandmaster level. People like Hikaru Nakamura have played this several times with great results. This is one of the most aggressive openings in all of chess for black. Play often follows kind of similar to what we just saw, bishop to g5, e6. Instead of queen to d2, white will go ahead and start the attack. Bishop e7, queen comes behind the pawn. Instead of castling though, queen to c7, and white will castle. So you can already tell that there's a lot going on here. White's pounding down on the king side of the board here. Black's going to start expanding on the queen side here, bringing his attack on. We're on move 11, and this position's already very sharp. And often maybe not often, but sometimes in these open Sicilians, black won't even castle. It won't make sense to, or he won't have time to. These positions are just so sharp and complicated. Wow. I'm so excited by this position, I can't even talk. These positions are so sharp and complicated that it might not make sense to castle. You just gotta start your attack. So if that's more your playstyle, you want to go all out, maybe look into this the Najdorf Sicilian. If you think that your opponent will mess up before you do, this might be a lot of fun for you. These positions are always very exciting. Now we're gonna look at some queen's pawn openings. That's playing d4 on move 1. Now, generally, these positions are going to be a little more closed or boring. They won't be as exciting or aggressive as the stuff we just looked at. Sometimes they can be, and we'll look at one of those. But as a general rule, these are just a little more positional games. So, an example of that is we'll look at the London system. And this is something Magnus Carlsen plays a lot. Now, this has been called the old man system before, if that's any giveaway. There's a chance you can get a kingside attack going, but generally this is just going to be a slow positional game. Magnus is very good at getting a slight advantage, a slight edge, and just keeping it the entire game, and just slowly building his attack up. And if that's your play style, maybe the London system will play well for you. And another example, probably what I see the most after d4 on move 1, is the Queen's Gambit. That's when they play c4, and you can accept it or decline it. If I play against the Queen's Gambit, I generally play the Slav or the semi-Slav, which goes something like this. This is called the semi-Slav defense. In the semi-Slav defense, I'm going to end up playing knight b to d7, bishop to d6, and castle. And generally, I'll play for e6, so I'll just show you what that looks like. Something like this is very common. Now you can play d takes c4 after they move their bishop, so you don't lose the tempo. And yeah, black's got to move too, right? So these positions are just generally a little bit more boring and slower, more positional games, but I've gotten fine results with it for black. So if you're an aggressive player and you need something to play against d4, what I've started playing now is the Nimzo Indian. So that goes something like this. You play knight to f6, they play c4, e6, knight to c3, and your bishop comes down here and pins the knight. So In this position, on the master level, white's won 35% of the games and black's won 30% of the games. So that's a 5% variance. So again, this is a position that plays very, very well for black. It's a little more aggressive than other stuff we looked at. If you're an aggressive player, this opening, again, should be another one like the Sicilian you put in your repertoire. It's kind of a position that plays itself, and there's a little bit of theory to learn behind it. A couple different options in these positions. Generally, you're gonna play d5 and c5, so a little bit complicated. Whoops, but it's just a good opening to play for black against d4. It's a good response. I would recommend it. Finally, we look at what I play as white, c4. Now, I don't play c4 because I think it's the best move. It plays fine. It's a good move, but I play c4 because at my level, I'm rated about 1850 right now. People still aren't too familiar with the English opening. They're very familiar with e4 and d4 openings, but not as much c4. So I like to get people out of their comfort zone as quickly as possible, and while staying in mind. So by doing, the best way to do that is to play openings they don't know. So I play c4, and the idea behind the English is to get control of the white squares in the center of the board. Generally, I mean, there's a couple different ways to play the English, but black can often counter that by playing the symmetrical variation of the English, which is exactly what it sounds like. They just play copycat for like 364 moves or something like that. So white has control of the two center squares, the two white center squares, and if I move my knight, I have my bishop on the squares, and black has control of the two dark center squares, and if he moves his knight, he has more control. And if I face this, I'll generally play for rook to b1 and try to expand my pawns. That'll look something like this, or castle, rook to b1, d6, a3, bishop attacks my rook, I defend it, and something like this is pretty common. And generally in these Englishes, white's gonna play on the queen side. That's where your pieces are pointing. I got my bishop eyeing down over there. This bishop can develop to e3, possibly b2 to counter his bishop. My rook's on the b file. My knight's over here. This knight can pop into d2 and develop a couple different ways. My queen can come to b3, maybe a4. My play is just going to be on the queen side of the board. I'm probably not going to try to checkmate my opponent in the middle game. So these you don't play for checkmate, you play for advantage on the queen side often in these Englishes. For example, if he were to take here, this is just gonna play fine for white. I've got good position here. Another example of an English opening is the reverse Sicilian. Something like this often. Sometimes they'll capitalize on me not having my bishop on g3 already, playing d5. But this position plays just fine for white. And again, and often, even in these positions, I'm a little bit more likely to checkmate my opponent here because they don't have the space on the queen side anymore with the pawn on c4. But these positions still aren't going to be as aggressive as, say, the e4 positions we looked at. I'm still going to play a little bit on the queen side. I'm going to often bring my bishop over to the b2 square. What would you play here? Different options. Something like this. This is again a pretty common position, and in English, again, it's not too sharp, not too exciting. I've got a little bit of a checkmating chance here in the middle game, more so than I did in the other English variation. But these positions aren't too sharp and exciting as a general rule. So again, E4, often aggressive and sharp. You can get boring in close positions, but these positions are just more likely to checkmate your opponent in the middle game. D4, often a little bit more close positions, often a little bit more boring in positional games. And C4, depending on how your opponent plays, can be either which way, but they're generally going to be more closed and boring. So that was a very, very rough overview on a couple of different openings. There's more openings we can look at, like knight to F3, and G3. And if you'd like me to go into some more openings, give this a like, and let me know you enjoyed it, and I'll go ahead